Good afternoon, good evening students, I hope you're doing good. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're back with another lecture concerning civilization. As you can see, we are going to deal with the last chapter concerning the Great War or the First World War. It will be about the consequences of the war and Wilson's 14 points and the Treaty of Versailles. For Wilson's 14 points and the Treaty of Versailles, we are going to mix them together because they are interrelated. Especially with the project of Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States of America. But before I start, as usual, I invite you to like the Facebook page of this channel in order to be notified whenever I post something new, and also subscribe to my channel if it's not already done. That would encourage me to do more and also help you out during the period of exams. With that being said, we shall start with the first point concerning the consequences of the war. So the first point is the fact that nearly 10 million soldiers died, and this is a huge number for that period, of course. And the second point is the fact that four empires collapsed. We have the Russian Empire in 1917 with the success of the Bolshevik Revolution. Then we have the German Empire and the Austro-Hungarian empires in 1918, of course, after the signing of the general armistice in November 11, 1918. And you have also the Ottoman Empire in 1922. Of course, the territories that were held by this empire were taken by the French, either the French or the British. The third point is also we had independent republics which emerged in Austria, for example, Czechoslovakia and Hungary. And the fourth point, the Bolsheviks took power in Russia 1917. This is very important to know, especially when we are going to tackle the next chapter concerning the Roaring Twenties. We are going to see why, because they developed a sense of feeling against communism, or the Red Scare as they called it. The last point to discuss is the fact that Germany was also obliged to pay reparations, accept the fact that it is the one that started the war, and give back Alsace and Lorraine and other territories, of course. These are the major points of the consequences of the war or the Great War. Now we are going to talk about Wilson's 14 points and Versailles. What you should know is the fact that we have indeed 14 points made by Wilson himself, the President of the United States of America, but we are not going to talk about 14 points, but we are going only to tackle 5 points, which I think they are very important. So this is why I decided to, let's say, mix the point of Wilson's 14 points and the Treaty of Versailles, because these points were presented as a word project during the negotiations of Treaty of Versailles. We shall start with the general armistice in November 11, 1918. Okay, Germany signed the general armistice, which means that Germany surrendered. And in June 28, 1919, there was the Paris Conference in Versailles. Okay, the purpose of this conference was to have negotiations, and Germany, Austria-Hungary were not invited. Okay, because they were excluded. Russia as well, because Russia was dealing with the outcome of the revolution and all. Then we have the participants of this conference. We have the Prime Minister of Great Britain. We have the Prime Minister of France. We have the Prime Minister of Italy, and we have the U.S. President Thomas Woodrow Wilson. Anyways, we are going to talk about each participant and what the country wanted from the conference in Versailles. So we start with Lloyd George, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. He wanted to keep the monopoly on trade and territories, and mainly the sea trade. So the Brits or the British were pretty, let's say, smart, because keeping the monopoly in the sea trade would oblige other countries or nations to pay some specific taxes to Great Britain in order to give them the pass, or to let them sail in that territory. The second one is Georges Clemenceau, the Prime Minister of France. He wanted to keep the colonial territories, but the main purpose or the main aim or the main goal of France at that time was to weaken Germany. The Prime Minister of Italy, Vittorio Orlando, he wanted new territories in North Africa. Then we have Woodrow Wilson, who presented the World Project, which was very important at that time, which is our main purpose today. You should know that the 14 points, it was a statement of principles contained in a speech given by the United States President Woodrow Wilson to a joint session of Congress first, okay? It was on January the 8th, 1918. It was about the goals or the aims, what Woodrow Wilson thought about the future, and he was also, he wanted to assure the American people that the Great War, was fought for moral or a moral cause. And to have a post-war peace in Europe and in America, of course, these 14 points should be taken into consideration. Therefore, Woodrow Wilson presented his 14 points in the conference as a world project, but not everyone was happy with his ideals. So the first point to discuss, which is the most important one, is the League of Nations. Okay, the League of Nations purpose, if you want, was to settle world conflicts with diplomacy and economic sanctions, which means they are going to have some international laws, and whenever a country or a nation violates that law, there will be some economic sanctions, for example, or if there is a conflict between two nations, they will first try to fix their problems using diplomacy. So this was a good initiative by Woodrow Wilson. Then he also added no secret treaties, because if you think about it, the Great War itself started due to these secret alliances that were made between nations or empires. So it was a period of tension, and this tension came as a result of the secret treaties, of course. The third point to mention is the freedom of high seas. This is very important because we had the term of international waters. What do I mean by that? For example, you have a country. This country has its own waters, which means this country is responsible for that specific area of the ocean. Then you have the international waters, which means beyond that area, whenever a country wants to go from there, to sail from there, there will be no problem at all because it belongs to the whole world. Why Woodrow Wilson wanted to have the freedom of high seas? It was also difficult because the Britain or Great Britain wanted to have the monopoly of the waters. The fourth point to mention is right to self-determination. It means whether countries want to stay colonized or create their own state, which was the case of Algeria, for example, thanks to or due to the referendum. And people voted for having their own state, their own country, their own nation. So Woodrow Wilson wrote about the right to self-determination. The fifth point and the last one to mention is to work on disarmament. Which means to reduce the amount of weapons, because one of the reasons of the Great War was the militarism. People or nations wanted to have as much weapons as possible in order to feel safe and be able to defend themselves in case there is a war. Anyways, this is about the consequences of the war, and it's a short summary about Wilson's 14 points and the Treaty of Versailles. To sum up, the Treaty of Versailles was a peace conference in a place in Paris called Versailles. It was supposed to negotiate between the powerful nations of that time and empires, if you want. But Germany and Austria-Hungary were not invited. Russia was having problems with its own revolution and all. So these nations sought only their own and personal benefits. And of course, the points that were signed upon were being violated later on. This is what led to the Second World War in 1939. Anyways, if you have any kind of question, feel free to ask them in the comments below. Message me on the Facebook page. I will answer you as soon as I see your message, of course. If you need more details, you can email me. I always leave my email on the description below. Otherwise, I tell you, see you in the next video. Peace.